From the start, the hothouse was designed to intimidate. And when you turn into a horse-shaped driveway that leads to the entrance, you suddenly understand what a convict meant in 1929 when he described the penitentiary in a letter to his mother as a giant mausoleum adrift in a great sea of nothingness. The prison dominates the Kansas countryside. It juts abruptly from the gentle grassland north of the town, Leavenworth, population 33,700, piercing the hard blue sky and clear air. Most old prisons are surrounded by high walls that hide them from the public sight. At the hothouse, the penitentiary's two largest cell blocks are the front wall. Each is 7 stories high and longer than a football field. These great stone giants are joined in the center by a rotunda capped by a grand silvery dome that rises more than 150 feet above the ground. The prison's architects patterned Leavenworth after the majestic United States Capitol building in Washington, D.C., with its 2 cell houses replicating the chambers of the Senate and House of Representatives, and its rotunda serving as a smaller version of the Capitol dome. At the time, the design was not meant ironically. It reflected the boundless optimism that even the worst criminals could be rehabilitated, and so authoritative and exalted an environment. But prison has none of the grandeur or marble-clad Capitol. Its facade, made of rougher ashlar limestone cut from a nearby quarry, is a faded yellow and has a stark, impermeable look that makes it foreboding. A red brick wall is connected to the cell houses, and it encloses the penitentiary's 22 acres. Built entirely by convicts' hands, the wall is unlike any other in the Bureau. 4 feet thick in spots, it rises 35 feet above the ground and sinks another 35 feet below to prevent ingenuous or diligent convicts from burrowing to freedom. Because of the wall, it is impossible to see inside the prison grounds from Metropolitan Avenue, the street that runs parallel to the prison. And it is just as impossible for a convict inside the prison yard to see the outside world. This isolation is international. When drawings of the prison were unveiled on March 21, 1897, architect William S. Emames proclaimed the new penitentiary was the first in the world to be entirely self-contained. It would have its own power plant, water supply, maintenance shop, hospital, and the first school ever built inside a penitentiary. It would be a city within a city, he said, where convicts could be safely tucked away and forgotten by the outside world. The hothouse has lived up to Emame's promises. When asked, prison officials often describe themselves in municipal terms. The warden explains that he is like a mayor overseeing a $17 million annual budget, nearly 500 employees, and a walled city that will cost several $100 million to construct today. His executive staff, known as associate wardens, compare themselves to city commissioners. There is a commissioner of public works, associate warden for maintenance and operations, a commissioner of parks and recreation, associate warden for programs, a police commissioner, associate warden for custody, and a police chief, the prison's chaplain. Even convicts lapse into municipal jargon, calling their cells my house, the guards, the police, the hole, the jail. When it first opened, the prisons needed next to nothing from Leavenworth's community. It used convict labor to grow its own food at a prison-owned farm and chose its meat from its own herd of beef cattle. It produced what clothing, furniture, and other goods it needed at plants inside the walls. The only commodity that it could produce was the guard force. The farm and cattle are gone now, but Leavenworth still remains set apart from the outside community. It doesn't allow civilians inside its claustrophobic world. Relatives and friends can visit convicts, but these sessions take place in a special visiting room that is not part of the prison's interior. Public tours of the main penitentiary compound ended in June 26, 1910. We are short of helping during the hot season, Warden R.W. McLaury said to a reporter at the Leavenworth Times. If anything should happen, such as a woman or child fainting under the intense heat while passing through, there would be much liability of panic and injury to visitors. McLaury's attitude prevailed through the decades, although the reason for excluding the public changed. Most wardens simply didn't want to be bothered. The Bureau of Prisons had never before given a journalist unlimited access to one of its 6 maximum security penitentiaries, and I did not know what to expect when I first arrived. If I had not received special permission from the Bureau's director, J. Michael Quinlan, I would have been turned away. Most journalists only flock to a penitentiary when there is trouble, usually an inmate riot. From outside the walls, they watch as the flames lick up from burning buildings. They listen to the angry demands of convicts and wait until officials have regained control, and then they move on to some other calamity. I wondered what everyday life was like inside a prison. We are all affected by crime, even those who are never directly victims. We avoid walking the streets of major cities at night for fear of attack. We are not permitted to board an airplane without first walking through a metal detector. We awaken in the middle of the night, startled by a noise, and I lie paralyzed with fear that an intruder is lurking in the shadows. Who are these criminals who terrorize us? By observing the routine rather than the aberrant events in the prison, I hope to understand the inmates, the men who guarded them, the institution itself. Everyday happenings rarely reflect extremes. Rather, they spring from multiple factors: institutional constraints and demands, coincidence, self-interest, and individual efforts, noble and selfish. In the ordinary, we are likelier to see the real person, not some mask worn for the glare of television lights. At first, Quinlan was enthusiastic about my project, but when I mentioned that I wanted to focus on Leavenworth, he politely suggested an alternative. Newer institutions are more efficient because they are better designed, he explained, and rehabilitative programs that are effective in many of the Bureau's other 47 facilities simply don't work at Leavenworth because its inmates are too hardened, too hopeless. Quinlan said he was worried I would get an unfair view of the entire system by studying the hothouse. I understood but disagreed. There is a permanence about the penitentiary at Leavenworth that transcends the latest psychotherapeutic rehabilitation program or whiz-bang architecture that makes prisons look like suburban shopping malls. Almost 90 years have passed since Leavenworth first opened, and during that time, society's views about prisons have swayed like Kansas wheat in a spring breeze. Yet, it is a penitentiary like Leavenworth that society has always sought as a last resort. While I could not actually live inside the prison, Quinlan agreed to let me come and go as I pleased at any hour. I could speak to any inmate or guard who wished to speak to me. There would be no guards standing at my side to monitor conversations, nor would they be there to protect me if I got into trouble. Inside the hothouse, I would be on my own. When you enter the Horseshoe Drive at the prison, a sign directs you to stop at the brick encased intercom under a lighthouse-shaped gun tower at the front of the prison. A monotone voice asks your name and why you wish to go inside. As a matter of routine, you are asked if you have any contraband, such as illegal drugs or firearms. No one expects a visitor to admit that he is smuggling. The question is a Miranda-style warning to prevent anyone from pleading ignorance if caught later. The only way into the front of the prison is through double doors of the administration building, a square structure that stands 4 stories high and juts out from the prison rotunda. A heavy steel gate protects this outside entrance, and a large wooden sign is posted next to the doorway bearing Leavenworth's employee motto, Leavenworth Pride, proud of where we have Leavenworth Pride, proud of where we have been, proud of where we are, proud of where we are going, pride in a job well done. The administration building lobby is as far as most visitors ever get. Those coming to see inmates are directed left through a series of steel gates into a prison's oblong visiting room.